Yeah, you have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We've got to stop them! They're going to kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hi, it's Christine Hart. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm trying to come in live. But we can't hear the ads running. So I'm dependent on one of the other producers to tell me if he can hear me. Oh, so I'm getting a just a sound check here from one of my producers over in America. So let's see if he can hear me. Right now I'm speaking and hoping, I am hoping that I am coming across, really, really loud and clear. So, So, Bobby, can you hear me there over in America? Just going to check one more time. Okay, this is terrible, isn't it? Coming in live from London, it's Christine Joanna Hart with the Christine Joanna Hart Show, and I'm coming in on a time that's actually not my own, because I've got a very special guest who is over in Hong Kong, and so I'm going to try and bring him in, but I'm just doing a sound check to see if I can actually be heard right now. So please answer me, Bobby. So I'm making a sound out for Bobby, whether he can hear me. So I can see him writing, but nothing's coming up. Oh, he's saying I sound just a little too loud. So, okay, I'm going to move the microphone away from my mouth, and hopefully Bobby over there in America can say that this is a little bit better sound-wise. So, Bobby, how am I doing for sound right now? Is that a little bit clearer? You sound just a little too loud. Okay, but a little less, maybe. A little less. Okay, so is that a little bit better? I'm going to speak really softly now, so I'm not super loud. As long as it's clear. I'm hoping it's clear. I'm hoping I'm clear. So let me go and bring in my guest, and let's fingers crossed, everybody. It's a very special guest, and I'm a massive fan of this man, so I hope he will over loud and clear. So I'm just connecting up with Robert Stanley, and I know.
Hi, Christine.
Oh, hi, Robert. Sorry about that.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can hear you really, really clear. Really clear.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Good.
Christine.
Oh, no, you can't hear me. Oh, gosh.
Oh, hang on. Sorry. Okay, I should hear you now.
Okay, hear me now?
Yeah, that's weird. Settings changed for some reason on me. Okay, gotcha.
Okay, now, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, good. It was all a bit hectic this morning, wasn't it?
Yeah, I've already done one interview today, so it's no big deal.
Oh, good. I was rushing around because I had the school run, and that takes 2 hours. It's London, so I was rushing back, and oh gosh, completely. So anyway, never mind. We're here now, and we're live, going out across America, which is good, and hopefully we've got an audience in London as well. So just for everybody, mostly in London, because I know most people in America have heard of you, and perhaps there's some people in London that haven't. Can I just go over your life story, just briefly, of how you woke up, became uber aware, and developed a higher consciousness?
Okay. You want me to summarize that, huh?
Please. Please.
Yeah. All right. Well, as you said, most people in America know me. I'm from America, even though I'm living in Hong Kong right now. My father actually lives in the UK. He's been remarried. He's married to a lovely British lady. And yes, they live near Sheffield. I guess that's in Hope Valley, Derbyshire, actually. So,
how nice. That's
yeah,
nice.
it's beautiful country there. Yes. I've traveled to 58 countries.
Wow.
So far. This is the first time I've lived outside the U.S., being here in Hong Kong for the past 3 years.
Right. Are you working out there? So what did you start your working life doing, Robert?
I've had, it's very colorful, actually. I started working at age 16. Right. I mean, legally in the U.S., I was working at a gas station, pumping petrol, as you call it, and doing some maintenance in the garage. But I'd actually been working freelance jobs prior to that. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's just kind of been the course of my life. In any case, I started traveling the world at age 13. So my work ethic is a little bit unusual. My history is a little bit, actually quite unusual, I think, compared to most people. At least that's what I'm told. But things really started to get bizarre for me when I was working as a security guard on the beach in Malibu, where I grew up. And even though it wasn't part of my job, I helped rescue a boy who was bleeding to death at a home there on the beach that he and his grandparents were visiting. They didn't live there. They were visiting that day. Uh-huh. And in the process of helping the boy get the proper medical attention he needed, and it was emergency care, is what he required. He'd run through a sliding glass door that was not safety glass, and it had cut him so profusely that he was bleeding to death. And the grandparents, naturally, they were in shock. They hadn't called for any emergency response. So when I went to the house, I sprinted over there as just immediately, as soon as this thing happened, I ran. I just happened to be very close by. I ran in the house and I called the emergency medical response. And fortunately, they came very quickly and they started treating the boy. and he had to go to hospital, and he required over 300 stitches in his face and head. And if you know anything about medical issues with humans, when we cut our scalp, the blood loss is tremendous. And it's just, I mean, it's really very quick, and it's easy for a person to bleed out very quickly. So time was the essence, and I just happened to be there. But as I was doing all that, I had a very surreal paranormal experience where I saw what looked like parasites floating near the ceiling of the room where this had transpired. And as I saw them, I really thought I was just imagining it, but because they sort of like just came into view out of nowhere. I mean, it just didn't make any sense at the time that they would just manifest like that. And then,
and what did they look like, Robert? Like
they were very dark. Yeah, they were very dark. They looked like, in my mind, they reminded me of ticks, but actually they didn't look like that. That's just that was my impression at the time, was those are parasites, and they reminded me of ticks because they were very stealth and dark. They were more like, I would say, smaller than my fist, but there was at least half dozen or more of them.
On the ceiling?
Near the ceiling.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't a high ceiling, but I mean, that's where they were when I saw them.
And did they have bug eyes, like bug insects?
No, they didn't. They didn't have eyes at all, as far as I could tell. They look, actually, in retrospect now, they look more like amoeba, and I do have pictures of something similar, if not identical to them on my website. In the articles section, you can find it there. Meet our covert controllers, the Archons. At least that's what the Gnostics call them, I believe. So at the time, though, I remember what it was. When I was helping I'd already called the paramedics to come and give medical attention immediately. So, or as soon as possible. And then after I hung up the phone, I was helping clean up the mess because the grandmother was still standing there like a statue. She was obviously deeply shocked by the event. And as I was talking to her, she said something that made me think, I mean, I don't know where it came from. It was more of an intuition, instinct, whatever. I know what it was. She said that she was glad that the door was shut because if it had been open, she thought that her grandson would have run full speed across the living room and jumped over the railing of the second story to the beach below, which he probably, he could have broken his neck doing if he'd done that. But anyway, so she's telling me these things and about the boy, her grandson. And at that, I had a revelation, whatever you want to call it, an intuition that the boy was hearing voices, and these voices were telling him, whispering into his mind that he could fly.
Right.
And it was totally irrational. I got to admit, at the time, I thought it was very strange. The whole thing is really bizarre. But as I was having that thought, that's when these things manifested in the room. And I think, honestly, I believe that they were there and they are there all the time. We just don't see them because they're in a lower vibratory rate that we can't see into normally. However, I believe I was in an altered state, and that's how I saw them briefly. And then I kind of went back to my normal thought process, or whatever you want to call it. Right. I forced myself to come back to so-called reality because that seemed very strange. And I obviously don't want to be seeing creatures like that, if at all possible. So, but there was something wrong. I could feel there was something very, very, very wrong. Even after I left the house, the boy had been taken away in an ambulance. And I was feeling like I was somehow I was under attack. I didn't really equate it with those parasites. I just at first I tried to think tell myself that I was just disturbed by all the blood and trauma, which I think anybody would be. Some people faint when they see blood, but I don't. It was just disturbing, to say the least. But this feeling persisted, and I actually felt like it was going to, whatever it was going to literally drain the life out of me through my solar plexus. I just don't know how else to describe it other than, if I had to give you an analogy, it's if you ever have a sink full of water with a stopper and then you pull the plug and you watch it drain down. Yeah. It was like, it really felt like that was what was going on in my solar plexus, which I could not understand. All I know is that I needed to react to it. So it was compelling me to do something. I didn't know what. And ultimately what I decided that afternoon later, after I got off work, I decided I was going to go up on top of one of the mountains and meditate, pray, whatever you want to call it. And ultimately, the timing was very serendipitous in that it was not only an equinox, there was a full moon equinox, and it doesn't happen like that all the time. But it just so happened that night, as I sat there, I was watching the sun set on the horizon as the moon was coming up. So I was literally between these two heavenly bodies, and I started to do some unusual things. I mean, some exercises, or it was an effort on my part, an attempt to protect myself and ultimately find some resolution to whatever it was that was going on. So I ended up spending the entire night there by myself up in the wilderness on that mountain, somewhat unprepared, but I really, again, I was just running on instinct. So while I was there, I had, at some point in the evening, I had an out-of-body experience. At least that's what it's called. And during that, what felt like moments, maybe a few minutes, I encountered some being who claimed he was either my father or the father. I think he said the father. And he was a very radiant being, meaning that his light was coming. He was radiating an immense amount of light as we were in this other dimension. I mean, obviously, when I say that, I meant an astral plane is what some people call it. Yeah. A spirit world. I don't know. I mean,
and did you feel a lot of love coming from him?
I would like to say that at the time that I believed that, I wanted to believe that. I really wanted to believe that. And I think he wanted me to believe that too. But honestly, looking back on it, a little more sober or straightforward thinking, no, I didn't. My first reaction was a bit of paranoia because my physical body was laying on a slab of cement out in the middle of a wilderness area, which is populated by wild animals. So I was a little concerned when I saw motion, even though I was out of my body. I was like, as soon as I saw, at first I felt okay. I thought, wow, whatever those parasites are, they're not going to come into this realm of light. Oh. But when I saw some sort of motion off in the distance, naturally I was drawn to it. Was a little concerned until it approached me, and then I saw it was a man wearing a robe, looking a lot like, the prototypical Jesus, the archetype. I'm not sure we even know who or what he really was or what he looked like, but this is what he, so my query was, who is that? That's what I was thinking. And his only response was, I'm the father. And then he started laughing, and it was not a good laugh. And the next thing I know, I was sitting bolt upright back in my body in this normal reality, except I thought at that moment, I really thought that I'd only been, I didn't think I had gone to sleep. Even though I've been laying down trying to, it's really hard to sleep out in the middle of nowhere with just your clothes and you're just laying there on a slab of cement. Yes, I was tired, but I just closed my eyes and I had that feeling of falling, that literally, like sometimes when you're falling asleep, you feel like you're falling and you catch yourself. It kind of startles you back. Well, I didn't fight it, and I fell out of my body, I guess you'd call it, is what it felt like. And I was okay with that. But when I came back into my body, I thought it was just like a brief kind of a vision, some sort of message, right? That had lasted, moments or maybe a minute or two. But then when I looked, when I laid down, when I closed my eyes and lay down, the moon was directly above me. But when when I sat up, the moon was now setting on the horizon. And I jumped up and I thought, wait a minute. I know something just happened here. How could I have fallen that hard into sleep? I mean, I was completely lucid and then nothing. That didn't make any sense to me. I mean, it really, really bothered me. I was, to say it was, that's a mild, it's actually an understatement. I'm kind of at a loss for words how I was feeling at that moment. I think you Brits call it gobsmacked. I mean, really, I was completely befuddled by the whole thing. So, so I went back to work after the sun rose. I had to go back to work anyway. So, and I did, I was still very confused about what was going on. So I checked in on the boy or his grandparents, and they told me that he was going to live and that he'd lost a lot of blood, needed a lot of stitches, and again, this is not my job. I don't even know these people, but I suddenly found myself telling them that that they could heal the scars on his face, but if they didn't heal the scars on his soul, that this would happen again. And as the words came out of my mouth, I had no idea why I was telling them that. It really, none. I was more confused than they were. And I mean, I felt bad because obviously they'd been through this traumatic event. And here I am, this stranger just telling them stuff that just sounds like nonsense, And so anyway, I walked away. I didn't say anything else after I walked away and out of the home and back to where I was stationed as a security guard, thinking I was going to get fired for acting like a complete nut. And even though I'd helped them. So, because I did know the owner of the house. I knew pretty much all the property owners. I was the head of security for a few years prior to that. Even though I was a young man, they entrusted me to do this particular job for them. And so as I was sitting there trying to make sense of it all, a girl I knew came up to me and she said she was very excited. She said she'd seen me in her dream last night, or that particular night. I was up in the mountains, and she said that I had taken her from her bedroom and up to the mountains and taught her how to fly, which I was like, at first I wasn't interested until she said that I took her to the mountains. And I'm like, what? How wait a minute. Because her home was not far from that location. Oh. Very bizarre. She lived a little bit to the south of that. East. Anyway, so she's telling me this and I'm thinking, well, that's really weird. The way she's describing it, she said it was like something out of Peter Pan. And that once I had taught her how to do this on her own, that I followed her back to her house, to her bedroom, made sure she was home safe, and then I left. This is the way she describes it to me. Okay, so I honestly, at that point, I wanted to dismiss it as all just a weird coincidence. However, when I went home after work, my grandmother called me. And she was a very special lady to me, in that she was very spiritually minded and also had helped raise me to a large extent. Uh-huh. And she said that she had the most unusual dream of her life, where I had shown up that particular night, just like the girl. I had shown up the same night I was up in the mountains. She says, I showed up in her bedroom at the foot of her bed and was glowing, lit up like a Christmas tree with all these lights around me. And she said it was the most beautiful, amazing dream she'd ever had. And that I was saying something to her, but she couldn't remember what it was. But she was so amazed by it, she just had to tell me. Well, as she's telling me these words, I felt like I was going to just faint dead away. I was just, because the implications of it all were hitting me so hard that it's like, okay, if this is real, what does it all mean? I have no clue. And there was no refuge for me at that point either. I knew that I was going to have to figure it out. So that was the beginning of I mean, I'd had some odd experiences in my life, but nothing even close to that. So that was the motivation for me to go down this path.
And where did you first come across Enki and Enlil? Is that from the Sitchin books?
Yeah, I read those many. Actually, here's hold on. So I spoke to a neighbor about this. He was a couple years my senior, and his parents were writers in Hollywood. Sorry, I guess throat's a little dry. And I had told him a bit of what had happened, and I was trying to piece it all together. And so for some reason, he was guided to just grab a book off of his parents' bookshelf. He hadn't even read it. Something spirit just guided him, and he pulled it off of the shelf, and he brought it to me and at a later date. And he said, hey, I think you should read this. I think it can help you. It's very intelligent person. I mean, and his parents obviously writers. They're very intelligent people. But I did not know why or what happened when he gave me this book that was written by a friend of my father who'd been a minister in a place called Self-Realization. It was headed by Paramahansa Yogananda. He was a guru that came to the U.S. And my dad was not only a disciple, but he ultimately became a reverend. And he knew the author of this book named Norman Paulson. My dad had never talked about Norman, but they had gone through some things together when they were both disciples of Yogananda. So it was really weird for my neighbor to hand me this book. It was called Sunburst, The Return of the Ancients. It's changed its name. It's now called Christ Consciousness. But the bottom line is this. In there was not only accounts that Norman had, put together of his life, which was way more strange than the stuff that I was starting to experience, but it really did help put some things into perspective. And the reason I'm mentioning is because in there, he quoted from Sitchin. I didn't know who Sitchin was, but that would have been around, sometime in 1986 that I was handed that book. And what is equally bizarre is that in that book, he talks about an experience where he would face-to-face encounter that he had with Satan. The way he described it was Satan or Lucifer at the mental hospital in a place called Camarillo, California. It's near Oxnard, or the Point Mugu Naval Base. It's just a little bit inland. What is so synchronistic about that is at the foothill of the mountain where I was that night in 1985, September 21st, 1985. Oh, actually, September 22nd.
What made him say it was Satan?
Well, because that's what the entity told him.
Did he? How did he phrase it?
He said, he introduced himself. He looked the part, I suppose, not with the horns and a tail, but he looked very sinister. There's a drawing of it in the book. Somebody put together for Norman. And they did some sort of battle in that he was taunting Norman, saying that there's nothing you can do, that I am, the master of this world, and I'm going to torment these people. I'm going to destroy this place. It was very disturbing, honestly.
And this book is Christ Consciousness by Norman
Paulson. Yeah. So you could read about that briefly. You can link to it or get a further description again in the articles section of my website at unicusmagazine.com. Okay. It's called The Birth of the Archon.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because, here's the thing. At the time, I didn't understand that. So some of those clues in there really didn't make sense to me. But Norman actually wrote, based on what he was told by his contacts, benevolent human extraterrestrials, they claim that they knew who this Lucifer Satan guy was before he fell into darkness and took others with him and created this war in heaven, the rebellion. So, and they explained it very carefully to Norman, and he put that in his book.
What did they say?
Well, they claim that he was a builder of worlds, and that he and his crew were going around doing what they do best, the time, which was building, various worlds up to a point where they could sustain life, intelligent life, so that spirit could continue its evolutionary path or progress through experiencing physicality. But I mean, we're talking paradise. These are divine worlds, benevolent worlds, symbiotic, not parasitic in nature. And and that is a huge difference to what happened after. I mean, because this world was one of those worlds that had been built by these divine beings, and it was a paradise, and there was no parasitism, there wasn't any predatory behavior up until the time that Lucifer allegedly went insane. He's also known as Enki. He's got a lot of names and titles, but in any case,
and is it a fallen angel or what they call Annunaki? Sorry, I'm saying that, pronouncing it wrong.
That's all right. It doesn't matter. I know what you meant, Annunaki. It depends how you want to pronounce it. It's all the same thing. I think
are they the same as the fallen angels? Same?
Yeah, the watchers. I mean, angels. It's a Greek term. It just means a messenger.
Oh, I see.
So if you look at the thinking of the Book of Enoch, and it talks about these watchers from heaven, and how some of them chose to come down here and basically interfere. That's a very mild telling of what allegedly really happened to this world
when it was happen?
Well, okay, so I got to go back a little further. Supposedly Lucifer, Enki, whatever you want to call him, and his crew were benevolent divine beings, not. They didn't have, they weren't angels with wings. They were actual beings, spirit, soul, body. I mean, divine beings that were going around doing the work of the Creator. So at one point, though, they ventured into an area of space that was off limits or forbidden because it was dangerous. For some reason, Lucifer decided that it didn't apply to him, that he and his crew would be all right. They were curious. They decided to go in, and allegedly it drove them mad. Whatever the energy in that area was, let's just call it a black hole. I mean, it sounds insane, but if it was something like a black hole, and they decided to go in, the effects would be bad. As far as we know, that would be suicidal. But just for argument's sake, let's just say they went into something like a black hole and were driven mad. And in the process, this is where the Archon parasite that I saw was born.
Right.
It talks about that. They don't call them Archons, but they just say that these thought forms began to manifest around Lucifer and his crew. So they basically infested themselves. Now, I know it sounds bizarre, but we allegedly know of cases here like the Tibetan monks that can create thought forms like monstrous creatures just with their thoughts that would then be sent out to protect them. In other words, if they felt like they were threatened, they could actually manifest this just using their thoughts. And they call it a tulpa, T-U-L-P-A. But of course, that's not proof in itself. A lot of this is conjecture and speculation, but that's allegedly what happened to Lucifer, and that's why the rebellion ensued, because once he and his crew managed to find their way out of the forbidden zone, they had been altered. I know I've said this before, it's a horrible analogy, but much like a family dog, it's a loving pet, it's very loyal, listens to you, but if it becomes infected with rabies, it no longer recognizes you and can bite you. And it's a sad state. It's a really sad state, but it does happen. We know this. Things could happen. Okay, whether it's caused by a parasite or ultimately wherever these parasites predatory behavior.
Where the Tuapa, who's manifesting the thought forms? Who was doing that then? This black hole manifested.
Apparently it was part of creation, and yet it was already being established that it was off limits because it was a danger zone. It wasn't a judgment on anybody. It was just a warning that, don't go in there because it's dangerous to all life forms. And yet for some reason, Lucifer decided he and his crew would be all right if they went in and investigated it. So for whatever reason, now that is just one explanation. I'm not sure that that's really the case, but that's what that was in the book. And it gave me a starting point. Honestly, I had to read that book over a period of decades, a couple decades before I saw that for what it really was. And even then, it took me a long time to put it in the proper context for a period of time.
And this is the book Christ Consciousness it was in, yeah?
That's what they call it now, yeah.
Right.
And I do have that. I photocopied that and put that particular excerpt, alleged message from benevolent extraterrestrials about all of that. It's there on my website on that particular article.
Do you think God would create something like that? I mean, because now you're describing it, I think I probably would be a bit curious, because even when you think, oh, I wouldn't mind going there and seeing what that's all about.
Yeah, you know? I can't speak for God, obviously. And here's my feeling. Anything is possible. And in the realm of possibilities, I suppose if you are God, or as far as God is concerned, anything is possible and should be explored at some point. It doesn't mean everything is going to stand. So all the different possibilities have to be considered. And, the thing is that about creation is that if it reaches a state of equilibrium, that's basically death. Everything stops. It's stagnant. So there has to be some sort of catalytic agent that helps move things forward, continues the growth. And so I don't know if this was an accident or if it was by design, really can't say, or even if that's accurate. It's one of the problems about life on Earth here is it's really difficult to get factual information that can be verified in these matters. I'm sorry to say, I wish it wasn't the case. And believe me, I've looked. I'm still looking every day. I do spend a portion of my day every day sifting through. In fact, I just sent you some new stuff that was sent to me. It's very compelling. It may be accurate. It may be that the answers are that simple about our true history and about the future. I mean, I'll give you a summary. What I'm trying to get at is this. From various sources, I do believe that, and also feelings I have about past lives in this world, is that it started off as a paradise planet, as I said, and that it was a place where beings that were divine would come and commune together, and also with all of creation. This was a very beautiful place. However, after Lucifer went insane and a war ensued, it was taken over. This entire solar system was taken over by force. And a lot of destruction ensued. And this was relatively recent. I think for millions of years, this world was a paradise planet, up until the time of this militant overthrow and enslavement that ensued by an evil empire headed by Lucifer or Enki or whatever you want to call him.
Do you think that the Draco reptilians, don't they come from Orion or somewhere like that? Don't you think it's the reptilians, or you don't really go into that?
How would we know? I understand people are saying that, but that's not proof just because someone says it. It's all part of a narrative that's based on speculation and innuendo and theory. I mean, it's just there's a lot of finger pointing, that's for sure. One of the problems with Sitchin, though, since you brought it up, is and I did eventually. I read all his books, and I actually met him once. We had a mutual friend who was working for the CIA. In any case, the thing about him is he actually graduated, or he was attending the London School of Economics. Much like I think he was a classmate of George Soros, which is run by the Rothschild family, who work for the Vatican. And ultimately, I feel that all of that is Luciferian in nature. So, if you read Sitchin's books, he's basically an apologist for Enki or Lucifer. I mean, Enki is Lucifer. If you look that up, just Google it. If we don't have time to go into all the history of it, but he's known by many different names, and Enki or Ea, Loki, whatever. There's a lot of titles or names that he uses. But the other thing is, in that in the works of Sitchin, not only is he considered the father of mankind here, he's also considered the savior because he saved us after the Great Flood. However, I really think he's the one that caused it. That's when the war started. And so, they say what they say about history is always written by the victor. So if in fact he was victorious and he took over by force and he is now, Lord and master of this domain, his empire, then it would make sense that he would create that kind of propaganda through whatever means necessary.
Who created the systems here? The banking systems and the matrix that we live by?
Well, if you look at the back of the U.S. $1 bill, I'd have to say it was Lucifer. I mean, that's his sigil. That's his seal on the back there. It's not the Great Seal. Nothing really great about it other than it's the so-called Great Pyramid at Giza. Unfortunately, the records that used to exist on this planet have been destroyed or hidden, much for this reason. And also contact with these extraterrestrials is somehow being blocked. It does trickle through at times, but this is a bit of nonsense, this mind game that they're playing with us, official disclosure. I think it's completely irrational to believe that the Pentagon and the UN and the Vatican are going to suddenly now tell us the truth about what they've known for eons, about the actual identity of these various extraterrestrial groups and their agendas. It just isn't going to happen because they've been they're not just in cahoots with these extraterrestrials, they are servants of what I would consider to be the evil empire, the demonic ones. These demonic entities really took over and have had a lock on not only just this world, but our entire solar system was incorporated into that evil empire. It wasn't that long ago, about 14,000 years ago, when that allegedly a comet came in and grazed or struck the planet, rearranging everything, wiping out. I mean, Mars took a huge hit, and there was another planet just beyond Mars that seems to have been destroyed. So, and other people have speculated about how it was done or when it was done, but the bottom line is it was done. The damage cannot be hidden. Look, scientists called what happened here scientists call this the Younger Dryas event. And it wiped out nearly all human life on the planet at one time. So they had to reset. And they did a pretty amazing job at it. Unfortunately, it wasn't repopulated with divine beings. So I know more divine beings did come in later because there's been this effort to restore this world back to its original state. And that is ongoing.
Walk-ins, have you heard of those? Walk-ins?
Yes, I have. So
where are they coming from? I'm
not sure. Right. I'm a little skeptical of all of that walk-in and channeling and other things. I mean, actually, you have to be skeptical of all, including people that claim that they've had contact, because there's so much manipulation going on. I mean, as it says in biblical terms, Satan can appear as an angel of light, because obviously that's who Lucifer is. That's what he started off as a being, a light. As a matter of fact, all of us who are human must understand this. It's really should be spelled HUE-MAN, human. Hue meaning light, of various shades of light. That's what we really look like, because we're not just physical beings. We have a soul. The soul is actually like a sphere or an egg shape of light. An intelligent living energy, if you want to be specific about it, that's connected to all the rest of creation. It's just like a seed. Actually, it's better if you think of it as a seed of light that's in a state of growing or becoming.
But they made us, didn't they? I mean, they took us and put some of themselves in.
Well, look, my understanding is all the different races, ethnicities that came here were brought here or came here over time. It's always been a a destination for certain extraterrestrials that are either, traveling or wanting to expatriate.
Oh, you mean whatever. You mean like black people are different from a different solar system than white people?
And Polynesians and the rest of them. I mean, why wouldn't it be that way?
No, I agree. I think it is that way. Why now are we, especially in Europe, there's an agenda to push them all together? Like we are, there's not going to be much blue-eyed blonde hair going on for sure. I mean, why is that?
It's not the ethnicity. It's the militarization of migration. That's really what these people are refugees. And they didn't need to be forced into Europe, but it's being done to serve an agenda. Now, I'm not really sure. There's a lot of speculation about it, but it seems to me that the actual rulers of this world that are human are doing the bidding of their masters who are not human. And much of that is coming from the Vatican through the Jesuit order, and it has been for centuries. So they are masters of manipulation. They're doing this because they feel they're divinely guided and authorized to do this.
But what is the end? What are they looking for? Some people say it's total control. So they cause chaos, and then they have to.
No, they're trying to retain control because they know they're losing it. I mean, Brexit is one example, but and it's a very small one. But there's an awakening that's been happening since 1980. For myself, it was 1985. Most people, it started in 87. If you were alive then, the energy that has come to this world is different, much, much different. There are waves of energy that are being sent here that's helping us awaken on not only a physical but a spiritual level. So between 1987 and 2012, there has been a mass awakening, and it's only increasing. It's actually at this point I would have to say 2012 was the tipping point, and the Dark Lords knew that, and they still know it, and that's why they were trying to scare us into thinking it was the end of the world, but actually it's just the end of their world, the end of their empire here.
Right.
So they've become increasingly desperate, and so they're doing all these things. They just want to retain control. I mean, the secret space program is part of that. That started back in the 40s or whatever, and they thought that they were going to expand their empire even further, and all that did was alert other worlds that are divine into having to come up with a police action. It's one thing if we're quarantined to this particular region. If they'd stayed within their own borders, within their evil empire, it wouldn't have sent out an alarm to all the benevolent worlds beyond that, hey, you got trouble coming. You think about this. This world is not civilized. It's a military base. It has been ever since it was taken by force. And it's based on corruption and lies and cruelty. And so do you think any benevolent world would welcome us in our current state? Absolutely not. It's dangerous for them to just come and try and interact with us. It's really dangerous. I mean, so they don't want us coming and migrating into their world. It would be absolutely disastrous. So they've had to step in, and that's why you see recently there was an article that said that the military, specifically the U.S., but in concert with other military bodies around the world, that they are preparing for war in space. They didn't say against whom, but we can assume it's not going to be human. Or at least humans from this world. Right. So, yeah, it's definitely underway. These changes are underway. It's just they're not going to be able to retain control of this planet. It was taken illegally. It's immoral. It's unethical. And eventually, over time, hopefully in our lifetimes, we'll be able to see more of this progress being made towards liberating it and restoring this world.
And do you think we have a father? I mean, is the N.W.O, is that, if they're brothers, that's not much of a God as Jesus Christ explained God as like pure love, blah de blah. I don't think the Old Testament God was a god. All that, you know.
You got to understand that all of that has been misinterpreted and misrepresented, either out of ignorance or intentionally to further control us. And so the doctrine or the narrative that has been presented is, well, I gave you some links there. I suggest you take the time to read it. I'm not asking you to believe it on face value. Just consider the implications. If what this man says is true or accurate as presented by benevolent extraterrestrials to him in the late 1980s, I think it was 87 it started for him. In any case, this man may have actually been given some truth about the history of our world, specifically, our relationship to these other divine members of the cosmic family. And this is why the governments can't disclose everything they know, because not only are they working in concert with the demonic beings, if they were to tell us the truth about our divine heritage in the past and how all that had been stopped, prevented from going forward, and that they've been blocking contact with our divine family for thousands of years and distorting all the records. I mean, most of the humans here would absolutely revolt and protest and probably find a way to overturn everything really relatively quickly. And so the negative dark beings here, they've been working very hard through their various agents to distract us and dissuade us and manipulate as much as possible. But you can see that's coming crashing down. I mean, it was a house of cards to begin with, so it didn't take a whole lot. Ultimately, like I said, this particular push started in 85, 87, around that time. And that's why I was having those, it was, people like myself, Whitley Strieber, others started in 85, but more people started to awaken in 87. And by 2012, a huge number of people now are just, even if they can't they can't give you a detailed explanation like I'm doing, they have a sense deep in their soul that something's wrong. And so in other words, it's not as easy to lie to them as it used to be. And that is going to increase. This is what was shown to me by these benevolent beings, because once I figured out what was going on, I broke contact with Enki or Lucifer, whatever, because he's had me fooled for a number of years thinking that he really was a benevolent divine being. So, and he's good at that. He's really seductive. I mean, he's a master of manipulation. So were you
talking to him on a daily basis, or? No,
I was giving thanks to him, thinking that he was, he said he was the Father. So if you think about the Lord's Prayer, what is that?
Oh, yeah, I see.
Yeah, and he wanted me to believe that. That's the way he presented himself, as some sort of Father, Savior. And when you come up against obstacles in life here in this world, typically what people do is genuflect to some sort of higher power.
Sure, I think we need that. How do you know it wasn't the good guy that you were encountering? Why do you think now that it was?
It took a long time to come to that realization, Christine, and it wasn't just one source or one moment. It was a gradual awakening. The truly benevolent ones are they're very gentle in the way that they help us awaken and heal, not just physically but spiritually, because we're so broken here. I mean, this world it's a war zone. When most of the souls here are traumatized. Like I said, what I said to that boy's grandparents was accurate. There were scars on that boy's soul, not just his body. He was being attacked and manipulated by these entities, not just some, demonic entities like that we would consider devilish, but still sort of human. There's this whole parasitic thing on the other side of it. I mean, it's a component. It isn't just one thing. You've got these sort of like in a beehive, you've got these drone workers that are working for the Queen. It's much like that. It's a hierarchy, and there's various levels to this. Just like on the divine side, there's various levels of divinity, depending on what level you choose to be at or are working towards. Like, I'll put it this way: one is predatory, the other is symbiotic. In that, divine beings are always focused on being of service to others, and in so doing, that actually assists them in their growth towards or ascension back towards spirit source. Whereas demonic beings are always about service to self, and ultimately that is the cause of their ruin, individually and collectively, because it's unsustainable. There is no reciprocity there. So, and they know it, and it's sad because there isn't. They can't seem to break out of it, or perhaps they choose not to. But the bottom line is that's a dead end. There's no growth in it, so all they can do is remain parasitic and predatory, and manipulative by any means possible.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never felt that. Someone was just saying in the chat box that about encounters. I also had an encounter where I felt as if I fell out of my body, like you were saying, through my feet. And next thing, I felt myself rising higher and higher, and I knew my body was there. And I've had that kind of thing before. And I came face to face with a being, and he was like a giant, and I felt lots of love. My whole body felt pure love for this being. And then I noticed his face curled in hatred, and I thought, well, that can't be a benevolent being. His face is curling in hatred. And then I noticed he was looking past me, and I turned, and he was fighting a giant kind of snake, a giant, like a serpent kind of snake, and it communicated to me the name Odin, which I've never known before. That was weird, and I haven't had that experience since.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
That's right here, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic ride.
It's the message keeps getting more distorted as it goes down the line, but especially when Hollywood gets a hold of it.
For my new show,
but this is all intentionally distracting us from what's really going on, and so I suppose that on an astral level or spiritual plane, you are being given a demonstration of there are, and you'll read it in the book I just sent you actually, about these giant.
So join me,
Relatively speaking, they prefer to live on a world that would allow them to be much larger than we are. However, having said that, if you look back in the fossil record here on this planet, I know it's being terribly suppressed, but there are bones of humans that are anywhere from 8 to 14 feet tall.
See you there. It's going to be lots of fun.
So they were here for a period of time, and it wasn't because the gravity changed, it's because the situation was changed in such that the original inhabitants, most of them were wiped out and replaced by various groups that were brought here, usually that had been enslaved and brought here to work in this particular end of the empire. So, they do exist. I mean, all of it, from Monday nights, demons to angels, it's all there, and we're actually kind of in the middle of all of it. We're kind of a mix here. I do think that most of the beings here now are angelic or divine. and again, that's
the
part of
opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100%
the way it was prior to being
radio, and now we
taken over by a criminal cabal.
I'm sorry, the criminal cabal, because that was them. So that was them infected, wasn't it? Or just one of them?
No, it spread. The infection spread. It started with Lucifer and his crew, allegedly. I mean, other ways you can look at it is this. I mean, one researcher I've read from, he's very interesting. His name is Wes Penray. He claims that this Lucifer Enki was born royal in the court of Orion, and that he was the next in line, the heir to the throne. But that and then I would add that, okay, maybe so. But when he went insane and then ultimately returned home, his parents naturally would have said, "You're not fit to rule. You're unfit to be the lord, the king of this empire. You can't inherit that position." And that pissed him off so much he decided to start a rebellion, a war in heaven, so to speak.
Oh, I see.
That's a possibility as well. I mean, that's one explanation. Again, we're not privy to that. But whatever is the reason, I mean, we know there's something terrible happened in the solar system, and it altered this world, not in a good way. And everyone was affected that was here. A lot of them were physically destroyed. And then when you talk about Sitchin's work about, how they created the worker race, they're essentially a bunch of slaves. That was done after everything had been taken over by this criminal cabal illegally. And so he blames it on his family, but I disagree with that entirely. There's no proof of that. I think that he is justifying his behavior, his actions, his deeds, and trying to make himself look like a victim. And
so the ones that are reclaiming, they're the ones that weren't infected. They want to reclaim it back from Enki. Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's a possibility. I mean, that's the way it's looking to me at this time, is that this needs to happen, and it is being ordained from a very much a higher authority. I mean, like a divine spirit, a God, a creator. It knew that this was a huge travesty, an injustice, and that things had to be corrected, as opposed to just leaving it alone, because it was festering, as I said, and ultimately spreading. So there had to do something about it.
So what happens to humanity, who was probably created by
the modern human? Yeah, that's a good question. It's a bit of a conundrum. It's going to take a few generations for things to return back to, if that's in fact what's happening. It would take, unless they use some incredible technology and do things that I can't even imagine right now. Here's the thing. They have to respect our free will, because that's the other thing. Divine beings always respect each other's free will. Demonic beings do not. They always find a way around it through manipulation and lies, etc., sophistry. So it's incumbent upon us to make a decision as sovereign souls, whether or not we want to participate, if we want to continue down this path of being enslaved, or do we want to return back to that divine state of freedom and love and harmony and cooperation. So that's what, as this awakening continues, it's really growing exponentially. At some point, everything is going to be revealed. I don't mean disclosure. I mean every little thing about us is going to be revealed in a way that everyone is going to have to make that choice in their heart, whether or not they want to participate as slaves, or do they want to continue to move towards freedom and
but some of them don't think they're slaves. They're enjoying.
No, I know. I got that part. And it's going to be this is why we're having this conversation. It was already explained to me by the benevolent ones that not everybody's going to want to participate in the freedom, that they're going to continue their sort of like so condition for so long, for so many lifetimes, that it's going to be really hard for them, much like a person who spends most of their life in prison here right now. When they get out, they feel very uncomfortable and want to get back in to the prison system. So I realize that not everybody's going to want to go in that direction.
And some actually are having a good time. I mean, they are having a good time.
Well, it's what they know. It's like a bird that was raised in a cage. When you open the door, they don't want to leave.
But I think materialism, you can enjoy it. Fast cars, beautiful women, beautiful men, great sex, massive mansion, Lamborghini.
Yeah, but that's only part. As I said, we are spirit and body, and so it only feeds the physical, and so there's always this emptiness and a sense of longing, and ultimately, it drives them mad.
But
they're
drugs,
not complete.
They then get, they find a way.
Yeah, there's a hole in the soul, is what some people call it, and there's nothing else that will fill that. We have a longing for our family. We want to reunite to not only the extended family, but ultimately all of creation, spirit, where we came from, where we must return to. And it's going to happen sooner or later. Even those who don't choose it in the near future, at some point, will want to reconnect and return back to source. It's just part of our nature. I mean, that's where we came from. So consider it like a detour that some of these souls are going on, and something is gained from it, obviously, or it wouldn't even be happening. I know that was kind of hard for me to imagine that this not only was permitted, but that from a higher perspective, it was known that this was actually going to have some long-term benefit. I know it's hard to imagine.
But who created us to start with? Were we a slave race to help with the gold?
No. That was all done after, and that was relatively recent. I know Sitchin has a different timeline, but it was all very recent that there was this hijacking of our solar system and this world, the destruction of not only the world, but as I told you, it was over 90% of the population here was destroyed. So, and they were replaced by migrants that were brought in by force, usually. Some of them volunteered, but they were all enslaved anyways. They were part of Enki's empire, and they were brought here. Of course, there was a lot of genetic experiments or manipulation that went on after that to sort of perfect this worker race for him, to serve his empire. But, part of the thing is that we're conditioned through our perception is been badly manipulated by all the lies that they have told us. So it's really difficult. There's going to be, it's going to be a shock to many of us who've been here lived multiple lifetimes through this enslavement here. It's going to be shocking. Really, I mean, it already is. I'm just saying there's more coming. Especially this year, you can see it. They're talking about, the rumors are running hot and heavy about these various individuals that have been high-level people, pedophile Satanists that have been captured, and they're going to be punished and taken out of the system, as it were. And so, as the House of Cards collapse around them, it's people are going to be a little freaked out because they're going to wonder, okay, well, now what do we do? What is the truth about all this? Where are we going?
Why are they pedophiles all the time? That's weird. That you get elite pedophile. And why don't they like grown-ups? I mean, I don't understand that.
Because it's not about sex. It's about an energy. Remember, I was telling you about this boy, the boy. Those parasites, they feed off of there's a specific type of energy on children. They're not as not only that, they're admitting now that they are taking blood from young, healthy children, paying them for it, and then infusing it into themselves to extend their life and increase their health, which is completely insane. That's totally parasitic. But the elite have admitted that they're doing that now. In the past, what they would do is, from historical records, is for the god Moloch, known as Baal. It's very, very insidious. They were sacrificing babies, children, in these ovens, much like what the Nazis did with the, Germany.
Why are they putting children in ovens? What does that do?
Because it releases a certain type of energy when their souls are traumatized like that. Remember I told you about the boy having scars on his soul? The energy field around the soul is very powerful. And so by disturbing it greatly like that, it releases an altered type of dark energy, much like what was created when Enki entered that forbidden zone. It was all based on trauma. So in order to continue to acquire that type of energy, that negative energy, they have to do these traumatic events. So they're constantly traumatizing us to some degree and feeding off of that. That is their sustenance.
Oh, I see.
So they demand sacrifice. Yeah, well, it's not just an addiction. It's a sacrifice that we must make in order for them to sustain them. That's one of the things I learned about the Archon, according to the Gnostics, is that they're parasitic, predatory, but they don't just feed off flesh. They're energetically, like vampires. They're sucking up this negative energy that's emitted by us when we're traumatized. Either we harm ourselves or others. Whenever we're traumatized, we're on physical and a spiritual level. We're releasing a negative energy that they can then consume. You might watch the movie Jupiter Ascending. If you want to see, they're telling us something about it right there. Again, it's a fictionalized thing, but you can see it. It's quite interesting.
And Moloch and Baal, would that be Enki or some kind of
demonic? One of his sons, Marduk. Oh. Yeah, he's got a lot of family members running around. Some of them are loyal to him. Others obviously are not. And that's why he tried to say that they're the ones that are causing all the trouble. He's pretty good at deflecting blame. And
the Vatican, they're like Enki's army, the Jesuits.
Well, the Jesuits are, and obviously the Rothschilds are their bankers. And but the Jesuits aren't just militant. They're also very good at covert operations, which they've been conducting around the world for hundreds of years. They're very well financed. They've had a huge spy network through the confessionals, and then that's been expanded to include the digital domain. There's such a thing called a global surveillance system, and it's not for seeking out terrorists. They are spying on everyone all the time around the world, the entire planet. So I know they're not looking for terrorists. In my opinion, they're this is a way of keeping control over us, but also knowing, trying to find out anyway, when extraterrestrials come in uninvited to our world, because some of them can blend in quite easily. It's not very pleasant, but they will do it when it's necessary. And so,
you mean like the walk-ins, for instance?
Well, no, I'm actually talking about. You need to read the book I sent you. Okay. And they're not the only ones saying this. They're allegedly, look, Command Sergeant Major Robert O. Dean said that when he was in Brussels, stationed at NATO shock headquarters, he saw an assessment, and there was various groups of extraterrestrials that were coming to the Earth on a regular basis. The one group that scared them the most was, at the Pentagon specifically, was humans. He said that in the assessment, they determined that there were human extraterrestrials that were coming here and living here and doing God knows what. So that made them very uncomfortable.
Right. What was his name? Odin? Sorry, what's his first name?
That's all right. His name is Robert O. Dean.
Right.
Middle initial is O. Right. He was a command sergeant major. I think he spent over 30 years in the military and also worked for FEMA, and I believe NATO. So he's a personal friend. We became friends over a period of years. I interviewed him for my first book, and and also the magazine Unicus when we had that in publication. So this disclosure thing has been going on for a while. There's people in the Pentagon that have been coming forward, but there's a conflict raging there between the so-called white hats and the black hats. There's our good people in these agencies, even at the Vatican. I know there's some people there that they don't like what's going on and they want to fix it. But of course they're being prevented from doing so. And, but I do think that's changing dramatically.
What about these super soldiers? I heard you talking about that. And are they real?
Yeah, I'm sure they are. But the ones that we hear from, I think that's all disinformation, because the real super soldiers would never come forward. They just wouldn't, because they're absolutely controlled, and they, so the ones allegedly that are coming forward, they were told to do that, and they were told to tell us a certain script, and so it's really difficult. I think all of it is highly suspect. The artificial intelligence is real. It's not new. It's been here all along. It's part of Enki's empire. So again, the reason they're introducing it now is because they know that we are waking up en masse, and that it's going to be increasingly difficult to control us as we wake up. So they're hoping that they can achieve what they call the singularity before the mass awakening occurs.
What is the singularity?
That's what Ray Kurzweil is calling this point that we're going to reach, where we can interface with our technology, with artificial intelligence, in a way that is somehow going to be a benefit to mankind, because they're so much smarter and faster than us, right? And that we will integrate with them, hopefully in a way that's going to benefit, not further enslave us. I mean, they present it as something beautiful and wonderful and futuristic, and it's actually anything but that. It's very ancient. It's nefarious, manipulative, designed to control us and make us dependent. I mean, everything is dependent on technologies that are harmful now, and they would prefer that we continue down that path. But whether we do it or not, I personally don't think it's going to happen the way they want it to. And I'm actually, I'm fairly certain that it is, all of their plans are going to fail.
What was that about that David Icke is saying about this place becoming a home for, becoming a home for Satan, and that he's going to claim it as
coming out? Yeah, the grand coming out. Yeah, that's the other thing was supposed to, right? Sometime around the so-called singularity, a crisis will occur, whatever it is. Let's just say the economy collapses, or there's some huge global catastrophe of some kind. This is when the alleged savior will return in the guise of an extraterrestrial, and it's going to be more sophistry. It's very well calculated. This is what the Vatican's been promoting all along with their narrative, is that Jesus is going to return, and bind Satan for 1,000 years. The problem with that narrative is, or that scenario is, that there still will be a ruler, and that ruler will be their version of Jesus, not as the lamb, but a lion, a lord. He'll be the Lord of the earth, and in fact, it's not the real Jesus. It's this counterfeit one that they have concocted in order to control us. That's what I see.
Who is the real Jesus?
Again, I would suggest you read that book and make it available. Make that link available to your audience. It's really quite interesting. It's free. He allegedly
PDF.
It's a book. I mean, it's still a book, and it's it was obviously somebody put a lot of effort into writing that information. But he was or is an extraterrestrial that came from a very advanced world that is, when I say advanced, I mean it is still divine. They have a very good balance between technology and their spirituality, quite balanced. And so he volunteered to come here and assist. And it obviously didn't go too well, but, he made the effort. I think a lot of good was done by that. But it's after the fact. The dark forces did everything they could to distort it and turn it into something, again, weaponize it. All the good that was done, all the things that were actually said, were turned around, manipulated. I mean, look, it took them 100 years approximately between various councils of these men in this religion, which is based out of Babylon, by the way. It's not Roman. It started in Babylon, but it was all about creating this new savior, this new commander, Lord, that they could control, sort of behind the scenes. Yeah.
How did they weaponize it then? Just by that saying,
Well, my God, Christine, how many millions of people were killed in the name of Christianity or Christ? And in just the recent past. I mean, the Muslims are bloodthirsty. I agree, but my Lord, what the Catholic Church did, even before they were considered Christian, they killed the early Christians. Then they adopted Christianity, and anybody who didn't follow their doctrine, specifically, let's say the Protestants or Cathars or anyone that dared to question the doctrine of the church was tortured or killed and ridiculed. I mean, to the point where their whole everything about them was it had to be destroyed. So, and the Jesuits were part of that. They still are, by the way.
Yes, of course. What's going on with the Muslims? They're very in love with their god Allah, aren't they? Did they have an entity overseeing them?
Of course. In fact, they're very open about, prior to that whole thing with the rise of Islam through the Prophet Muhammad. In fact, Muhammad's family was very aware of this too, because they were all involved in it. The jinn. So in a way, I mean, I know they'll disagree with this, but we're talking again about demonic entities in the sense of being parasitic. These jinn are very devious in that if you try and make a deal with one of them, they'll give you what you want, but then they demand something in return. It's a deal. And it usually goes very badly for the human in return. But from what I've studied of Islam, it says that everyone is born with at least one of these jinn assigned to them at birth. So, and they have the ability to whisper into men's souls, which when I read that, I thought, oh, that sounds exactly like what I sense was going on with that boy. Now, the Catholic Church would call that possession. I would call it an infection. But I mean, because these parasites are in fact a host, obviously. They don't always hang around. They can be getting rid. They can leave, or you can kill them. So, but they do affect consciousness. We know this. Any animal, human or otherwise, that is infected has their consciousness affected. That's been proven by parasites. Parasites just do that. They typically don't kill the host, but they can. We know that for sure. So, again, I would have to say that all religion, not just Catholic, not just Muslim, but all religion ultimately is based on, at least in modern times, is based on this predatory, parasitic, manipulative mindset.
Oh, I see. So it's like we're getting infected just the same as the fallen angelic were infected.
Yeah. Yes, of course, because it's sort of like vampirism. Once somebody becomes a vampire, they got to go around biting other people to survive, and then those people become vampires, and so on and so on. It spreads. I mean, like any other infection. So yes, an infection of one's soul is what we're talking about. And that ultimately filtered down into the physical world on every level. Because I don't think this world was set up this way, where there's all this predatory parasitic behavior. It's possible. I know it's hard to imagine, but I believe it really is the case, especially as you read this latest book I sent you. I do think there are worlds that exist right now where there isn't any parasitic life form. It's hard to imagine.
I think I can imagine, actually. How do we fight this Enki? You know, it's so much more powerful. We're almost like rabbits, and we're not really. We haven't got much juice, have we?
Well, I mean, we do actually. Making a choice to embrace, as I said, one of my recent articles about the Matrix exit. It's incumbent upon us to embrace the divine and reject the profane. We can do that. I mean, nothing's stopping us from making that choice in our heart, in our soul. So something I've noticed recently, was brought to my attention, is that we know that physical exercise is essential for a healthy body, and yet we don't really consider often enough that spiritual exercise is important to keep our soul healthy. And so, all right, because I mean, if you think about it, like going to church on Sunday, that's nice. But if you went to the gym only once, if you only exercised once a week, do you think you'd be in good shape? Probably not. Right. So it's something that needs to be done as frequently as possible in whatever measure that suits the individual, in whatever method works best for that individual. And again, I'm really not talking about religion because, again, unfortunately, it's been so compromised. Whatever means that a person feels that they can connect back to creation. That's what I'm talking about. Being creative actually is a very good way to do that. Expressing yourself that way connects you to others on a creative level as opposed to a destructive level. It's just the polar opposite. I know it sounds simple. The other thing I say to people, I suggest, is being calm in the midst of a crisis. Super difficult. I mean, it sounds easy. It's not. It's actually one of the hardest things to do. Also, being kind when others are cruel can be very, very daunting. But it changes the energy pattern entirely. And it ultimately, being calm, kind, and creative helps us be more connected to all of creation. And that's what nourishes our soul or spirit. It's sort of like plugging back into the source, I mean, it's the difference between running off a battery as opposed to really plugging into the wall. There's a huge difference in the potential current or energy there.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I had that the other day. A friend who was doing a website for me, I gave him my password to my Facebook, and he took offense through something and took over my Facebook, my Twitter account, and started posting stuff on it, and oh gosh. And I got very upset and I started to get angry. Then I got really sad and I was crying. And then I went out to a field and I thought, it doesn't matter, and I did a meditation, and I could have gone, that way where you get really angry and you sort of lash out at the person. But I didn't go that way, and it kind of stops it, doesn't it? It stops the escalation of negativity. And
yeah, they want to keep us in that frequency on their level. See, this is a thing. When they say the lower realm of, like hell, the underworld.
Yeah.
Okay, I really think that it's here now. It's just a lower vibration. Most of us can't see it. Much like we can't see the higher vibrations. When we raise our vibrations, we can see it. But like I said, what I saw that day, I really feel like that was, I was sensing or seeing something that just exists here on a lower frequency. They're all connected. In other words, it's not like some other realm entirely. It's sort of like the various degrees of temperature. They're all connected.
Yeah. Yeah. I can feel it. I mean, just because we can't see people being tortured and beheaded right now doesn't mean they're not actually going through it right now, even as we speak. There's so many horrors in this place, and children.
That's on the physical. There's I believe there are lower realms here, as I said, where people's souls, or whatever you call them, are being tormented or scarred Yeah, I mean, it's a very, again though, this is why, because all life is related. There is no separation. That's a lie. So naturally, our extended family would be concerned about us, our well-being, and they don't want to see us suffer, because if they're divine beings that are service to others, naturally they're going to, do the best that they can to assist us. The big problem is that most of us have become so caught up in the distraction and the lies, we don't believe that anymore, that we have any connection to these other beings, our extended family. So naturally, we wouldn't reach out to them. I don't mean praying to them and worshiping them. I'm talking about literally just reaching out. Like, I mean, look, if you're sick or you're in dire straits, you might call a friend, but more importantly, you would want to rely on your family for, when you really are down. Hopefully, if you have a good family, you can do that. So, and I think we do. In fact, I know we do. It's happened for me. I mean, not just here on this planet. I'm talking about I've had some contact, not just Enki, but I've had contact with other beings that are, I would consider off this world, but they don't think of it that way. They don't. It's not like they're extra anything. They're just part of the family, our family, and so naturally they want to help, and they do watch. Most of the time they watch. Sometimes they will suggest things to us or help give us information, especially when even if we don't realize where it's coming from. Sometimes we're just, they understand, and but it helps if you ask. It really does. I found that to be the case. I mean, that article I wrote about the archons, I had been so confounded by it that ironically, I visualized Enki or Lucifer, whatever, at that moment, the Father. I said to him, I really can't figure this out. Could you please give me some clarity on this issue? And I left it at that. And shortly after that, and I don't think it was coming from him, honestly. I think it really was the divine beings watching over us. They knew what I was doing or saying or feeling, and they were assisting me very subtly to suddenly come to that awareness. And it happened over a period of weeks. And every time I'd find it, I mean, seriously, that book I told you about, Christ Consciousness, I'd read that thing at least 3 or 4 times, but I picked it up one day and I looked at it and I thought, it was like I'd never seen it before. I suddenly read something and I thought, wow, it made so much sense to me. It was an answer to what the question or my what do you call it? I was asking for assistance, my request. It was an answer to my request. And even the works of Carlos Castaneda's, I'd read all those books years earlier. And one day I was doing an errand. I popped into a bookstore and I saw that on the shelf and I pulled it off the shelf and I opened directly to this one passage about, and it was exactly what I needed to see. And I'd read it before, but it didn't make any sense. It didn't have the same impact. In other words, I built the frame, and now I was being given the pieces like a jigsaw puzzle. And I could sort of start to piece them together over time. So every time I got a new piece, I was all excited. And I thought, wow, this is it. And then I would get a feeling or a message like, no, there's more pieces to the puzzle. You got to keep going. So that's what I've been doing.
Excellent. So you were saying that the entity that I came in contact with was an Odin after all, because...
Well, I don't know. I'm just saying if he using that name, he was just saying he was the father of Lucifer or Enki or Loki, whatever, the same character. I mean, Odin is his father. That's one of the names. Orion is another. Anu, On. I mean, it's just, there's all these entities are the key players. They have many different titles over a long period of time, depending on what culture historically what culture you're looking at.
But wasn't Odin supposedly good? Don't people worship him right now?
Some people do. I'm not sure that he's even here. I don't think he has a hand in the affairs. If what I said before was accurate, that this entire region is under the dominion of Enki. If we're part of his empire, Odin has no say in this.
But he's Enki's father, so wouldn't he have a little bit of say?
Oh, yes, allegedly. But I mean, come on. My son's 22. He doesn't listen to me. He doesn't have to listen to me. You know, he's an adult now. I mean, I try and persuade him to do things, but I mean, it's like he's not a child anymore, and neither is Lucifer. He doesn't have to, listen if he doesn't want to.
This entity was fighting a serpent. What would that be? What would the serpent be?
Obviously, that represents reptilian, the influence. And this is one of the other things that they constantly do is try and divide and conquer us. And it works fairly well. The current belief is among most people here is that the reptilians are our enemy.
Yeah.
When in fact, I think that they've been enslaved as well, and they're suffering. Most of them are suffering, not all. Most of them are suffering and have been enslaved. So I don't really blame them for what's going on. I mean, again, if you look back in the historical records of the, archaeology, supposedly this was a reptilian world. Everything was giant, by the way. Everything was giant back then. Even a dragonfly was like, 10-foot wingspan.
Like the dinosaurs were reptilians, you mean?
Yeah, and it was a reptilian world, and then it was taken over by us or some faction of mammalian humanoid. So let's see. Who is the bad guy in all of that? And again, it was because something struck this planet and destroyed, the life on it. Allegedly, we really don't know these things for sure.
So they are trying to make out that the serpent is bad, but really it's something that lives here and has always lived here.
Yeah, well, not only that. I mean, we supposedly we have some reptilian aspect to our nature physically. Serpents by themselves really are not evil, I don't think, and they have a history of being associated with intelligence, wisdom, awakening. The Kundalini is usually described as these a male and female serpents running up the spine. This is the symbol of the caduceus. So, there's, and they are serpent looking, these ducks that run up our spine. That I'm not saying they are snakes. It just there's I'm trying to think, what was it? The cosmic serpent.
Yes, the cosmic serpent, the one that's wrapped around the earth. What is that?
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure. I'm trying to know. I was thinking the book by Jeremy Nart. Oh, shoot. Anyway, I'll think of it later. There was an anthropologist that went to the Amazon. When he took the ayahuasca, he started to see these cosmic snakes, and they seemed rather intelligent, and they were everywhere in the etheric or the astral. And they claim to have a hand in what's going on here, but I really don't know for sure. Yeah, it's a conundrum, honestly. I mean, I still don't have all the answers that I'm looking for, but I have a strong feeling, very optimistic, that all of this is going to be revealed in time.
I hope so. I think it's the one. It's sort of horrible to be trapped in a human body, because it's just this almost like you've had a knock on the head and you've been rendered stupid.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about it. If what I said is true, the Younger Dryas event, if that was a comet that crashed in here and killed most of the life, etc., that is hugely traumatic. And like what they say, like you said, amnesia. Or you were intimating that we suffer from mass amnesia. Yeah, I would have to say so.
And it's awful. And what's awful as well, most people, certainly in England, I think America is much more advanced. There's a lot of people that are so woken up over there. But in London, the only thing that matters to people is the class system, money. They think they're better than the Americans because to do with a class system. You know, it's like, we're not vulgar. It's not just money. And there's so much snobbery, and that's all they're focused on. They're not focused on, they don't even ask the question, why are we here? Who are we? They're focused on class. Actually, that is the one, not even money, but of course it's linked with money, but they're focused on class. Who is superior? I am superior to you. You're working class, so I'm superior, and I will feel superior, and I'll subjugate you in whatever way I can. That's how England, mostly London, operates, and that's all it cares about, you know?
Well, especially London. Yeah, you brought up a good point. Yeah, but ultimately they're subjects of the empire as well, no matter their rank. They're still subject to the higher authorities within the empire.
Right.
Okay, so they just have a little more privilege, but they're still servants or subjects of the empire, or they're actually property, if you want to be specific about it. We're all property of this empire. And so I just sent you a link called The Cosmic Serpent, subtitled DNA and the Origins of Knowledge. The Cosmic Serpent, yeah, very interesting read. I'm sure you can find a free PDF of it. I just sent you the Wikipedia just to give you a thumbnail. But if you Google that, I'm sure you'll find a free PDF online. It's been around for a while. It's very, very interesting. Now, as far as London, there are 3 cities on this planet that are the seats of power, like the fortresses for the Yankees Empire, and that would be starting with the Vatican, London, and then the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. All 3 of those areas, cities, are built exactly the same and managed, governed in the same fashion, and they're all connected to one another. So I realize that people don't understand this, and it's kind of more than we can get into right now. I do delve into this somewhat in my my second book is called Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C. And in the conclusion, which is rather lengthy, I do explain how the Romans, the Catholics, built a temple to Jupiter in Washington. That was their intent all along. I know there was a lot of Protestants that participated, but it was under false pretenses. Again, the Jesuits were masterful at that. But so Washington, D.C. is an extension of Rome, so is London. It just is. And I don't mean to say that lightly, okay? The Vatican is the seat of the global empire. The New World Order, the one world government, is based in the Vatican, and it has been for some time.
Oh, I can believe that. I grew up with the Roman Catholic Church. I grew up in one of their orphanages, and it's rife with sexual abuse, and the family I was put with were pedophiles. I think they did that deliberately.
Of course, it's a carryover from the Babylonian days. They sacrifice on some level. They're feeding their gods this energy, and it has to be done covertly, because people who are not participating or don't agree with it, and this is what's coming out. They can't stop it now. It's all going to be revealed at some point. But this has been going on for far too long, in my opinion. But I mean, it's nothing new, and it's everywhere. It's all throughout the government, media, entertainment. Jimmy Savile was just one amongst many, and it's hideous, unconscionable, immoral, unethical, but it's there, okay? And we have to deal with it in order for us to get well and become civilized again. We have to stop preying on children to satisfy these particular gods in order to curry some favor with them, so they don't punish us. I mean, it's just insane. It's an illness. I mean, honestly, I've said before, and I have to say again, evil is an infection of one's soul or consciousness, and it's playing out here in all its glory. It's absolutely grotesque. It's a distortion of what it healthy. I mean, for example, psychopathy is a lack of empathy. A healthy human, a soul connected to a physical body, would never, ever commit those kinds of acts because they have empathy, meaning that they're connected energetically. They have an emotional connection to those other beings, a non-physical emotional connection to one another, that they could never do that. It would they would feel horrible if they to do that. Whereas a psychopath is someone whose consciousness has been so altered and cut off from the rest of the family, from the rest of creation, that they can commit those acts and not feel any empathy or sympathy, whatever you want to call it. But those are just terms, but I think it helps better put into context or clarify what is really going on here.
So the Vatican and people like serving them, like my orphanage was called the Crusade of Rescue. Do they know that they're serving? I know. Do they know that they're serving Satan? Do they feel that demonic throb and think that it's higher being, so great? Is that what they think?
I can't speak for all of them. I really don't know what they would know. I suppose, like anything else, the higher up you go, the closer you go to the inner circle, of course, you're going to be granted greater privilege and greater insight. And but the problem with that, the trap, is that the further you go into that inner circle, you're actually going deeper into the prison system, and it makes it much more difficult for you to extricate yourself from it if you so choose. And a lot of them do. At some point, they wake up and say, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" You know, even if it's just on an intellectual level, whatever triggers them to have an awakening, and then they're screwed because they're in so deep.
That Malachi Martin, he wrote some great books, Hostage to the Devil. Yes,
he did, and I think they killed him for it.
Yeah, I know. I think they did.
Just like what's the other guy? Sorry. There was a guy who wrote about the Masonic order that in that level too. It's slipping my mind. It's all right. Yeah, they have no qualm about killing somebody. That comes very easy to them. Manly P. Hall. Yeah. That's the guy. I think they poisoned him.
Oh, really?
I believe so. Yeah, he crossed the line.
Max Spears. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was.
Yes, of course. I do think he made some horrible choices there. I mean, taking drugs for any reason is something you only do if you're ill. I mean, but recreate it. I don't know if he thought it was recreational or if he somehow has gained some sort of insight, but it's very, very dangerous.
But he was taking, because he was a friend of mine and he used to come on the show quite a lot.
Okay.
And he just was texting me just before it happened, a couple of days before. Yeah, and he said he was being attacked. He thought he was being attacked by Colonel Michael Aquino.
Oh, Lord.
I know. I've heard a lot about. I've heard a lot. An American woman, when she came along and woke me up, she told me about him, that he was responsible for these monarch programs, and I was investigating to see whether he had come to London or not. A guy who I used to know, Miles Johnson, ended up interviewing him, but he didn't say anything in the interview. He didn't, well, I suppose he wouldn't.
No, he's very skillful at sophistry. That meaning it goes back to the god Sophia, who allegedly created the archons. If you follow the Gnostic teachings or alleged Gnostic narrative cosmology, supposedly it was Sophia that created all this mess, the goddess. But again, I think that's blaming the feminine. Divine feminine is under assault here badly, and not just the Me Too movement. I'm talking about throughout time, since they took over here. They've done a number against the goddess energy. So anyway, sophistry. It's the root of the word sophisticated. So when you people like that are very clever using wordplay and manipulative type of neurolinguistic programming, which Aquino is master at. He's one of them. One of the demonic entities embodied in the Pentagon, at least he was for a period of time, worked for the psychological warfare department. Oddly enough, another guy who worked at the psychological warfare department was the author William Peter Blatty. the man who wrote The Exorcist. So, and he was raised and taught by the Jesuits. So it's not a coincidence. All these things are interconnected if you know how to do that. If you're brave enough, I suppose, to put these dots together, you start to see a mosaic that's very telling, very disturbing, very twisted. But Mr. Blatty, I believe, was put up to the task of exposing something that really happened and then dramatizing it in a way that actually did a lot of damage to the psyche of a lot of people.
How did it do damage?
Well, it scared them terribly, but it also made them think that somehow that the Catholic Church was in control of these entities when in fact it's the reverse.
Yes.
That's very curious. But see, that's what psychological warfare is all about, is twisting the truth, causing people's perception to be altered by any and all means. And in fact, this is what the Jesuit order has been doing. So I would say that they were the first military intelligence in modern history to do things like that. And so to see their handiwork all over the place, it's not a surprise. It's very disturbing to see. But I mean, so Aquino, you got to understand why this is important, is because he was an avowed Satanist going in. The military, the Pentagon, has no problem about recruiting a Satanist. I mentioned this in my book, in the conclusion of the book, Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C., that there was also an avowed Luciferian working for the Kennedy administration, and he was the guy that orchestrated the Vietnam War through the Gulf ofTonkin incident that never happened. So,
what was his name?
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I'm drawing a blank. But he was well known to do Luciferian practices, and it's not all about child sacrifice. There's other things that they do in order to keep this thing going. I mean, it's in a relationship. It's a working relationship. I think his name was McNamara.
Oh, right.
I believe. I'm just could be wrong. Anyway, it was one of those guys, Secretary of Defense, Luciferian. Why not? And that's just those are the guys that they admitted.
Yeah.
I mean, really, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of people that are Jesuits that don't tell you that. Or there are people that work for the Jesuits that never tell you that. They're just like in the CIA. They look for people that can be, they're called assets.
Yeah.
And they're trained, they're paid, they're usually killed, or their life is ruined after they do whatever they're supposed to do to serve that agenda. And of course, they don't even know that most of those people have no idea what they're doing, really.
Yeah, the monarchs. Life after that is, I would guess, not very pleasant.
Well, it's curious they called it the monarch because that's actually not just a butterfly. It's a title, monarch. Arch being the Lord, the archon. It literally means the Lord.
Oh, I see. Mon.
Yeah, that's
what does mon mean? My in French.
Yeah, my Lord. It's and who are we talking about? Lord literally means to someone. Yes, it's the Lord of the manor or whatever. I mean, it's the hierarchy within there. There's somebody who's always lording over someone else. And that's how a hierarchy operates, and especially in the military, but also in the religious orders and within economic and everything. Everything about this empire is like that. It's enforced. It's not about free will.
I think with the monarchs, they crash, they shatter the self, and then they have one of the altars that they use as a container. So I suppose calling them the archon uses that part of them as a container, and then just uses the body when it wants.
Well, allegedly, what I told you about Enki or Lucifer, when he went into that thing, he and his crew were so badly traumatized that they suffered multiple personalities as well. They don't use that language, but that's what I got out of it. Because we know that's what happens to humans when you traumatize them over a period of time badly enough. That's what happens, that you shatter their psyche or soul. And so I do believe that's one of the reasons Lucifer has so many different titles or avatars or characters that he plays. It may be completely out of his control that he probably has. I think he does have multiple personalities. And the problem with that, the real problem with that, Christine, is that an individual, a soul, is no longer sovereign when you lose your integrity. Yes. Meaning there is a conflict raging within that particular soul because it's now been shattered.
Yeah.
So there's a competition internally. Yeah, you can't reason. There's no rationality with an individual like that because you never know which one of the persona is going to be in control at any given moment.
Exactly.
So that's just it, and that truly is insanity.
Yes, it is. I think the only healing for that is Jesus Christ or some supernatural powers.
Yeah, it has to be it's a restoration that comes. But the thing about the divine beings, no matter what their rank, whether you want to call it Jesus or something, God or whatever, it can't be done to an individual, a soul, unless they're asking for it. It can't be forced on them.
Right.
That would never happen.
But they trick them as well, don't they?
Who?
They're going to shatter.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, they trick us into agreeing to all kinds of things that are harmful to us. Otherwise, we would never go along with it. Well, but again, I mean, when it comes to a healing of an individual that is shattered like that, it's not easy.
Yeah.
Because I've had other people ask me, well, why don't just higher beings intervene and heal Enki or something, end this. I'm sure they've been working on it, but it isn't that simple.
Yeah.
You never know what you're dealing with, or if you can rely. I mean, it just, and why would he? At this point, he feels like he is the Lord, the highest pinnacle of the pyramid that he created. So why, as Lord of the Empire, why would he give that up?
Yeah.
In his mind.
Oh, Robert, I think we finished the show, and thank you for being a fantastic guest.
Thank you.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Take a look around, kid. What do you see? Homes being foreclosed. People working 2-3 jobs just to put food on the table and still drowning in debt. Don't get me wrong. This country was founded on great ideals and principles. They've all been ruined by the banks. Open your eyes to banks that are robbing you. You know who my favorite president was? Who? Thomas Jefferson. Because he saw all of this coming and tried to stop it. He fought the banks. JFK too, and they killed him for it. The banking institution is more dangerous than an army, he said. He also said that every generation needs a revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that, just a dream. War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This is our war. And this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your